There's been terrible carnage in Syria over recent days. Most of the media have been not very interested in what they've been calling sectarian strife. I think that masks rather than reveals the reality. I think Islamists are once again slaughtering those they regard as infidels, in particular members of Syria's Druze and Christian communities. More than 1,000 Druze have been killed since around April 28th. Watch for the phrase tit for tat, implying moral relativism between those who began this conflict and those attempting to defend their communities, homes, and families. The so-called international community has done nothing useful, as usual. The Israelis have intervened to help defend the Druze for reasons we'll discuss. As usual, the Israelis are being criticized for that. Why can't they just issue statements at the UN like the Europeans do? Why must they, and here's another phrase to watch out for, fuel the fire? As of last Saturday, there was a ceasefire in place, but it's been spotty at best. It's a complicated situation. To help sort it out, we're joined by two FDD experts on this troubled region, Hussain Abdul-Hussain and David Daoud. I'm Cliff May, and I'm pleased to have you here with us, too, on this edition of Foreign Podicy. Gentlemen, good to see you both. I'll start off with this. You want to disagree with anything I just said in that introduction?
So yes, I think it's the situation is more complex, and I've had several conversations with our great Syria analyst Ahmed Al-Shara. We almost called him Ahmed Al-Shara.
It's almost he's got a very good piece in Foreign Policy magazine, which I quote from, and we'll have to have him on very soon to talk about this some more.
Ahmed's been following this day to day through open source. I've also had conversations with some of my friends in Syria, actually one of our mutual friends who's in Syria. And look, the feud that's going on between the Bedouins and the Druze in Sweden, the southern province of Syria, is, I'd say it's less animated by any particular ideology now than an age-old hatred that exists between the Bedouins and the Druze.
The Bedouins, we should say, are Sunni.
Bedouins are Sunnis.
And some of them are going to be Islamists, no?
Yes and no, but generally speaking, their primary identity is going to be tribal, right? While they are Sunni Muslims, their primary identity is going to be this tribal identity rather than anything else. Yes, some of them may be Islamists, but they've in the past fought against ISIS. Some of them have been in cahoots with the Iranians in terms of drug smuggling. So the complex community. And the animosity between these communities dates back to the mid to late 1800s when the Druze came to what is now known as Jabal al-Druze, right? The Mount Druze. And the Bedouins perceive this as the Druze coming and stealing their
they're coming from where to come?
From Lebanon.
From Lebanon.
From Lebanon.
Okay. And why did they migrate or immigrate or what?
1860 war between the Druze and the Maronites in Mount Lebanon. So you had fluctuations. Actually, there's a reason. The reason why there's a Jewish community on the coasts in Lebanon, or was a Jewish community on the coast, is because the Druze attacked a lot of the Jewish communities during this Mount Lebanon war. So you had this migratory pattern that led to a lot of Druze moving to Jabal al-Druze, what is now known as Jabal
which is now southeastern Syria, bordering Israel, bordering Jordan, just so people get there.
So there's this hatred that exists from that time, and the more I've read about it, the more I've seen it explained to me, it reminds me more of the Montagues and the Capulets rather than something ideological. Now, this hatred exists. Now, do people remember why it exists is a different question. They just know that I don't like you over there, right? And in the most recent, clash that started about 2 weeks ago. So it seems like Bedouins kidnapped a Druze, and then the Druze retaliated.
This was the merchant who was a fruit seller, and they abducted him and took his fruit away from him, and then they beat him up.
And then there was retaliatory kidnappings and back and forth. The Druze started shelling Bedouin areas, and then this erupted into civil disturbance. The government, to the extent that we can speak of a Syrian government, moves in, and when the Syrian government's moving in, we're not talking about an organized military necessarily. We're talking about HTS that has now become the core of a new Syrian military.
And I'm going to put a pin in that because we're going to come back to what HTS is and this whole history. But okay, good, finish. But I'll let you finish.
They come in to settle the civil disturbance, restore peace. But obviously, there's blood now already between the new government and the Druze. There's been previous clashes.
And some of these these government forces are not necessarily super disciplined, and because it's only recently formed. They're various militias pushed together, and so you go down and settle things. And some may think we settle things by keeping people apart, and some may think we kill the people we don't like. Right?
Precisely. All right. So you have kind of the core, which is probably more loyal to Ahmed Al-Shara, but again, not a necessarily disciplined army. And around it, you have these groups that have kind of glommed on that are less disciplined, and obviously these have more of an Islamist leaning. They have they have a history of friction now with the Druze, and there's an attempt to settle scores, perhaps to some degree, or to, the definition of restore order, I suppose, can be very broad. Is restoring order through what we would understand as civilized people as restoring order, or does it entail committing abuses? Now, abuses were committed.
What we're talking about, when I say we're talking about rapes, we're talking about murders, we're talking about executions. I don't know, there were guys speaking Arabic, and they were wearing press vests, and they were in a Jews' house of worship, and they were tearing it apart. Did you see that, what I'm talking about? I mean, that's not restoring order. Of course, they say they're press. That means maybe they won't get shot, but this is a problem. People wearing a press vest doesn't make you a legitimate journalist there or in Gaza or anywhere else, but okay.
By any means. But I think the things to emphasize here, look, the question is, was this ordered from Damascus, or was it a case of, this is a conversation I had with a colleague of mine, is it a case of Shara engaging in what we would call criminal negligence almost as a lawyer, right? Do you know, right? You're not ordering it, but almost certainly that if you send these guys in, all these abuses are going to happen. Do you not care, right? Do you have to do it anyway because you need to consolidate power? Do you think the abuses might help you consolidate power? So those are the questions we can't answer. The other question we can't answer, so we know that as the government forces moved in, the Druze attacked them. Or that's the kind of the narrative that but no one really knows, right? I don't think the way it was put to me is maybe Shara and Hijri, Ahmed Al-Hijri is one of the main Druze leaders.
One of the main Druze.
Yeah. Do not actually know who fired the first shots in this case. And then things spiral out of control. And you do have mutual abuses, right? Druze militias have also committed atrocity against Bedouins and so on and so forth. So the more you get into the details of it, the more this looks like a blood feud rather than this an ideologically motivated a purely ideologically motivated conflict or outbreak of violence. And I think that's something that we need to emphasize. That this is a complex situation that's going on.
Okay, I understand. Right. It's one of the reasons the media doesn't want to deal with this. Yeah. Do you want to debate if you want to, or reinforce?
Yes. So I'll just give another perspective on these things. Number one, this is not a one-off. He killed me and I kill him back. This is the third time that it happens to the Druze. And the previous
third time since
Shara took over in December.
In December of 2020.
The third attack on either the Druze suburbs around Damascus or the Druze in the south. And in the previous time, there was no one who killed anyone. Someone put out a video or an audio in which a Druze was presumably saying something bad about Prophet Muhammad. And the government and the non-government, everyone was going after the Druze pigs, as they call them, because Druze are clearly not Islam or Islamist. And this is clearly Islamist versus non-Muslims. So this is the third trial that's happened, number one. Number two, we know the tribes. Now, Shara thinks that we don't. The tribes that fought in this were bussed all the way from Deir ez-Zur.
The Bedouin tribes you're talking about, or they're not just Bedouin tribes. You're talking about the government forces that they brought in here.
Well, we call them Bedouin, but I'm not sure whether they're still Bedouin as nomadic as
they're settled because there's land disputes. You can't have land disputes with nomads, exactly.
Yes. So the fighting force, these clans, were bussed from northeast Syria around Deir ez-Zur on the border with Iraq. So half of these people are both Iraqi and Syrian. They were bussed 350 miles from the northeast to the south to take revenge on behalf of tribes they're not connected to. Now, mind you, the tribes of the south, the biggest of which is Shammar. Shammar is very well connected to the Saudis. And former King Abdullah, his wife and mother were from the Shammar and from the Sha'lan. And the Sha'lan have princes who are recognized as princes in Saudi Arabia. These tribes are the ones who neighbor the Druze. And these were not involved in the fight. Not involved. So all of this, they were trying to make it look as if all of this is clan and all of this is tribal revive. So this was carefully planned. Now, think, how do you bus 15,000 clan fighters, 350 miles? How do you rally them? Well, you know how? They use mosques. The mosques are under the Syrian Ministry of Religion. This network is official. So they use the mosque for total mobilization. They bust them, all of the logistics. They bust them 350 miles with all the bullets and so, but we know who did that. So these are two.
Who did that?
Yes.
The government did that.
The government, yes.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the names.
Okay.
So these are two clans that came from the northeast.
Yeah.
Number one is the Agonistes. And Agonistes has two people who are top officials in Ahmed Al-Shara's government. Hussain Salami, the chief of intelligence, who's from the Agonistes, and Yusuf Al-Hajr, who's the top political officer of HTS, who's also Agonistes. So these guys rallied their clan. And then you have another clan. Now this one it was bossed by a guy who's very close to Turkey. Actually, he's Turkish man in Syria. His name is Muhammad Al-Jassim, also known as Abu Amshi. He's from the Naim clan. And these are also on the border from Deir ez-Zor. And Abu Amshi led his clan. So you have these two main clans. And these fighters are half government, half not government. So many of them, the Druze caught many of these people and debriefed them. Number one, they found on them military ID cards. So what happened was that Shara, after Israel stepped in and said, look, if you come closer, your neck is on the line. So now he instructed these people to change into their tribal outfit. And they came, but they still had their IDs on. And these caught fighters, they said, they gave their rank. One of them said, I'm from Hama, Battalion 62, 800 cars, civilian cars came in and picked us up, Hama in the center of Syria. 150 miles north, picked us up. They drove them down in civilian cars so that Israel wouldn't recognize this as military vehicle, because Israel had told Shara, you can't move below this line. So they moved them down, and their instructions were kill Druze. And all the videos that you see, are you Druze? They kill you. Is your house of worship Druze? They'll desecrate it and then they'll destroy it. And we have videos of families killed in their homes, including that pastor.
Yeah.
The evangelical pastor, 20 people inside their home. The American citizen, Saraya, it was 8 of them. Just
American citizen of Druze, right? Yeah.
So this is not how clans operate. Clans raid next door. They if you kill someone from them, they'll kill one of you.
Right.
Yes, and they don't come 350 miles, distance, and come to you. Now, the last note I'll make about this, Abu Amshi, the guy from the Naim, who was one of the 3 commanding people, he was the leader of one of the battalions that they call Suleiman Shah or Suleiman Pasha, which is the Turkish Suleiman.
Right.
He is still the commander of what they call the Syrian National Army. This is separate from Shara. Now they pretend they're part of the Syrian military, but they're not. This guy is totally under the control of Turkey, and if Shara falls out of line, he will force him to get back in. He might even take him out if need be.
In other words, he's the representative of Erdogan, of Turkey, in terms and saying, I'm advising you, but I'm advising you very strongly because this is what Erdogan wants of you.
And throughout this, you will notice that the government of Turkey and Erdogan were speaking with so much authority over what should happen and what should not happen.
Okay, very interesting. I think it's important, and I also think it's useful, something you can do at a podcast you can't do in TV sound bites or a quick radio interview, that there be a little context and a little bit of history. And I'm going to kick it off because while you guys are much more expert at this, I have a license to oversimplify as a longtime journalist. So let me so people just understand, partly because for Americans in particular, and for Europeans too, I think they hear the name Syria, Lebanon, and they think these are countries. They've always been countries, and it's kind of this. I want to explain this at this point, but it's a Westphalian idea of nation states, and this is not the case in most of the Middle East. I hope I'm making this clear. I know you know what I know, but for others who are listening. So, look, for centuries, Syria was part of the Ottoman Empire and Caliphate, right? And it had its capital in what is now Turkey, all right? in Istanbul, which was formerly Constantinople, which until its conquest was the capital of the Byzantine Christian Empire, just so people get that. The French became the imperial power after the fall of the Ottomans. That was a consequence of World War I. Will. More specifically, yes, right, France was granted the mandate over Syria by the League of Nations, 1923, the mandatory power, but again, so people know what that means. After independence in 1946, and that was a consequence of World War II, there was a long period of political instability and military coups between 46 and 70 when Hafez al-Assad came to power, and he ruled until his death in 2000. And then his son Bashar al-Assad succeeded him, ruling until late 2024. Now, the Assads are Alawites. People should know, again, part of what we're talking why Syria is not a natural nation state is because it's made up of all these different, not just tribes, but groups, ethno-religious minorities. Who are the Alawites? They're a minority sect. They're sometimes said to be an offshoot of Shiism, with such distinct beliefs and practices that I would say, you're always free to disagree with me, that Iran's ruler, Ali Khamenei, for example, would have called them heretics if they hadn't allied with him. As allies, they're good enough Shia. If they don't ally with him, they're heretics. That's how I would say it, because they can drink, and I think some of the Alawites were said to the French at one point. You probably remember this. You must protect us because otherwise the Muslims will oppress us just like the Muslims oppressed the Jews. You know what I'm referring to? That because they didn't see themselves as Muslims anymore, just like the Druze. After all, what are the Druze? We're not going to go into this too deeply, but the Druze probably, I think, are an offshoot of Shia Islam, but they're not Muslims anymore. They've deviated from that, but that's why also to an Islamist, they're heretics. Okay, so what happened next? Syria participated in and lost wars against Israel in 48, in 67, in 73, eventually lost part of the Golan Heights, which President Trump in his first term recognized as Israeli territory. A war against the Assad dictatorship began in 2011. And we at FDD, by the way, we knew a lot of people who were involved in that, who we thought were really good people fighting against it. But assisted by Putin in Moscow and assisted by Ali Khamenei in Iran, Bashar al-Assad, probably killed 600,000 Syrians. I've seen estimates of that range. Over 13 million were displaced. Maybe half of that number as refugees. President Obama decided not to punish Assad for using chemical weapons, and the so-called international community shrugged. Last December, again, as we said, Bashar was suddenly and really quickly overthrown, much quicker than most people thought possible. And I would say that, last sentence I'm going to say here, was a consequence of the war, oddly enough, of the war that Hamas started on October 7th, 2023, because as a result of that war, Hezbollah was decimated, and without Hezbollah, Assad couldn't protect himself. He also didn't have Putin to protect him because Putin was distracted by his war of conquest against Ukraine. That left Assad sort of naked, and so he was ousted by, and let me go to there, he was ousted by the forces of
Ahmed Al-Shara.
Ahmed, right, whose nom de guerre was
Muhammad Al-Jilani.
Al-Jilani, which means Muhammad from the Golan Heights.
Father,
right, which is
his father
was okay. But so anyhow, you don't disagree with any of that. That's pretty much it. Yeah. So just to understand the history, this is nothing wrong with saying it. It's an artificial creation, Syria, and which makes it hard for people. I mean, I know, and you know, kind of elite or intellectual Syrians who are Syrian patriots, but that's a thin veneer, I would say, in Syria. It can and one of the look, why did the Assads take over as Alawites? Because they knew if they would either rule or they would be trampled. Isn't that probably the way Assad saw it? All right. The Druze in Syria number about 700,000. That's only about 3% of the population. The major Druze population is in Lebanon. About how many there?
About 300,000. So there's
5% of the population.
5% of the population of Syria, and about 150,000 in Israel.
Give or take.
Okay, and this is an interesting thing that we need to get to sooner or later. Generally speaking, the Druze, unlike some tribes and clans, and don't say we want our own country. They don't claim we need our own country. We'll be loyal to the country in which we live if the country doesn't mistreat us, right? And they have been extraordinarily loyal citizens of Israel. The Israeli leadership early on came to them and said, look, you're Arabs, you speak Arabic, you have a religion, you don't have to serve in the military. And they said, no, you have to draft us like anybody else.
I think 1956 or 7. The draft
was that it?
Yeah.
Okay, was that it? And now that you meet Druze who are generals, colonels in the special forces and commando units, all of in the Knesset. I mean, they're as loyal and patriotic as they can be. Now that gets to why Israel intervened, because when the Druze are under attack in neighboring Syria, these are cousins, they're relatives. The Druze come to Netanyahu and say, will you help defend our cousins? And he says, of course we will, right? And it is not just coincidence, comrade, that the serious attacks by Israel, counterattacks against Hezbollah in Lebanon, that was after 12 Druze Israeli children were killed on a soccer field, and they said that's the end of our patience. You want to elaborate on that? I'm going on too long, I know.
So, look, I think speaking of the Druze as any other community is complex. So, yes, the Israeli Druze east of the I think is it the purple line, the green line rather, right? Are patriotic Israelis. These are the Druze from northern Israel. When we start to talk about the Druze in the Golan Heights, the situation becomes much more
complicated. Yeah,
they've held on to their Syrian identity fiercely, and now some have said that it's because of Assad. But even after Assad's downfall, we're only starting to see the inklings of a movement towards Israelization among that Druze community.
Well, part of it was the fear, I think. And it was a realistic fear for a long time. If the Israelis decide, and this was talked during to give back the Golan in exchange for peace with Syria,
then they'll be perceived as
and we have taken Israeli citizenship, well, we're toast at that point. So we better not do that, even though our friends and relatives further in the Druze villages further south kind of say you should. This is a good country to be a citizen of, and you want to intermarry, and they are intermarrying and all that. But they said, yeah, but we can't. But if our villages go back to Syria, we cannot be Israeli citizens.
I think that was perhaps part of the motivation. I can't say it's the only motivation. When we talk about Syria itself, the Druze were the driving force behind the creation of the modern state of Syria. Sultan al-Atrash, for example, this is not just a Druze hero. He is a Syrian hero. He was one of the leaders of what was called initially the Druze revolt, but really it was a Syrian nationalist revolt against the French.
French.
These were people who were part and parcel of the creation of the modern Syrian state, viewed themselves as invested in Syria and Syrianness, even though to the same extent that Israeli Druze realized that, hey, by fighting alongside the Jews in 1948, what you're creating is going to be a state that does not reflect your particular identity. It reflects a Jewish majority, but hey, we're not going to be attacked. Similarly, they realized, look, there's an overwhelming Sunni majority in Syria. The Syrian identity that they were championing was that of the bourgeoisie Syrian Sunnis, the kind of the mercantile class. That was kind of the original vision of Syria. Obviously, that was changed when the Baathists and Assad took power. But they nevertheless invested in Syria. So I think this is only part of the question. Now, when it comes to the Druze in Israel, even Israeli Druze, we're talking about a very complex situation in dealing with a country that defines itself, including by law, as of 2018, as a Jewish state. You have, yes, Israeli Druze serve in numbers that are out of proportion to their percentage of the population. According to some statistics, they even serve at a higher percentage than Israeli Jews, for whom the state was built. But at the same time, you have a sense of alienation from the state of Israel among Israeli Druze. I'm not talking about just the Golan Druze. That there's a feeling of inequality. There's a feeling of, well, we're not getting our return for our money. And you had groups since 2013, like Urfud, right, which means reject, refuse, reject service, right? Then they've tried to advocate among younger Druze to move in a direction that embraces more their Arab identity, even though on the Druze nationality or the Israeli nationality card, they're listed as Druze, not Arabs, right? It's very unique considering that Druze elsewhere, particularly in Syria, Lebanon, they embrace their Arab identity. In fact, their Arab purity, the purity of their Arab blood, they're an endogamous community, they take much pride in that, right? In terms of how they pronounce Arabic, they emphasize certain pronunciations that mimic Fusha, right? Modern Standard Arabic or Classical Arabic, to emphasize their Arabness. They consider themselves and are considered fully part of Arab identity. In Israel, there was this movement at a certain point to classify Druze as almost a separate nationality, but the younger generation has been moved, but in some degree, to embrace that Arab identity anew. So to speak of the Druze as a unified whole, I think, is a mistake. To speak of the Druze as a unified whole, as allies of Israel, is a mistake. I mean, I don't need to remind anyone of Samir Kantar, who was a Druze, who in 1976 entered Nahariya and killed an Israeli family. And he was doing this in the name of Arab nationalism, Palestinian nationalism, but he was a Druze. Hezbollah launched a war, my war, in 2006 to free this man. They finally secured his release in 2008. And then he pops up again after the Syrian civil war in southern Syria, in Hadr, trying to recruit Druze for Hezbollah, successfully recruiting Druze for on behalf of, not within Hezbollah's cadres directly, but some of them have even conducted attacks against Israelis. He was killed in Jaramana amidst this recruitment effort in December 2015, by the Israelis. This is not ancient history. This is modern history. Recruiting Druze for the resistance axis, to cooperate with the resistance axis. So I think, and within Lebanon, right, I cannot say that the Druze leadership is anything but anti-Semitic. When we talk about Walid Jumblat, if you listen to him,
he's the head of the Druze community.
He's one of the heads of the Druze community. He's a preeminent,
most famous one.
He's a preeminent political leader. I'd say he has a rival to some degree in Talal Arslan. But if you listen to Walid Jumblat over the past year, he sounds like one of these, what do you call them, groypers, right? Where he thinks he's discovered something about Judaism that the rest of us don't know, and that this has revealed our evil intentions and our genocidal intentions and so on and so forth. And he says this in repeat interviews. You have Talal Arslan, for example, who takes a much more Arabist line. He's been a longtime ally of Hezbollah. And then you have Wiam Wahab, who, not a leader, but a political, I guess, attack dog, longtime ally of Hezbollah. Used to boast about supporting Germany in the World Cup because, and I quote, they burned the Jews. So to speak of this as a unified whole is I think, again, to reduce the complexity. And then we have to look at what the mission statement is of the IDF. Right? The state of Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people. This is where the Jews, where we come from as a people. We've reestablished ourselves where our origins come from, not from Arabia, as some people will claim, not from Europe, right? We come from this land. We reestablished a homeland in this land to be a majority, and to have one place on earth that grants equality to all its citizens, imperfectly as any country does.
But better in terms of its minorities than anybody else in the region.
But at the same time, where the Jews are a majority and where we have a country that serves Jewish interests. And this translates into the ethos and the mission statement of the IDF, which is to protect the state of Israel. If the IDF's mission statement is reduced to become effectively a tribal militia, if every community can then petition the IDF, well, I have brethren over here who may not really like you, but they're my brethren, and you must move in, and you must sacrifice your own sons and risk your own sons. Well, then why not, as the nation state of the Jewish people, respond to Ukrainian Jews who have still emotional ties to Ukraine and go fight Russia? Or even more closely, right? Again, as the nation state of the Jewish people, why not have, when Syria or Iraq or to some degree, lesser degree, Lebanon, were mistreating their Jews or persecuting their Jews in the case
of Jews or they're Jews?
Jews, they're Jews, right?
It's not
yeah, I know. But why not have Israel invade Syria in 1992? To free the Jews there.
Well, a lot of it is what you can do and what you can't do, right?
Sure, and it's also what you should and shouldn't do.
I can tell you some thoughts on this.
Yeah, of course, yes. And number one, let me just say that I'm very close to the Druze community, and this is something that they don't really like to say all the time. They probably won't like me saying it, but I'll say it anyway. The Druze perceive of the religion as someone that started since times immemorial. and that they've been there since forever in that part of the world, in that land. And they, like the Alawites, by the way, they
are like the, or they are similar to the Alawites. They're not like the Alawites.
The two religions are very similar.
Oh, they are very similar.
Esoteric
And the 1200 or 1300, there are even talks between them to merge together.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the differences are minor, theological differences. But the point here is that these tribes do not behave as religions, they behave as ethnic groups.
Right.
Now, the point with the Druze is that they had, just like the Alawites, they had to hide the religion. They had to pretend that they're Muslim. They had to come up with a cover story that, we came from that, the Fatimids, or in the case of the Alawites, from somebody else in Iraq. So they do that to avoid harm from Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, both of these religions don't have a clerical establishment. So they have a few people who know religion and enunciated, and the religion is not available to everyone from the people.
Right. By the way, this is a fascinating thing, that when you get to a certain age as a Druze, you decide, I'm going to be secular or I'm going to be religious. There's not sort of. It's either it's an arcane religion. You're either going to study it and become a very serious religiously, or you're going to be secular, which means you may not know a lot about your own religion because you're not studying it. You're minding the restaurant in the village or whatever it is.
And this is where the tribal identity kicks in.
Yeah.
So if you are a Druze and you have no instructions of religion or prayer or Sunday or Saturday or Friday mosque or church or synagogue, you do two things. You always marry Druze, and you always fight when strangers come to your village. And this is very important in the thinking of the Druze. Throughout the Lebanese Civil War, they had a militia, they called the Progressive Socialist Party, something, Wali Jumblat's militia.
Yeah.
Over 10 years, 15 years, they never fought any war outside of their villages or towns, which is exactly what you see happening now. Mind you that the Druze in this fight, they never ventured out of their villages. They didn't go to the Bedouins, or they didn't go to Deir ez-Zor. They always fight defensively if they're fighting on their own as a tribe. So this is very important to the Druze psyche. Number two, they are really loyal citizens wherever they are, whether in Lebanon or Syria or Israel. And as we said, in Israel, they've been dying in Gaza, like everybody else.
Yeah, fighting with the IDF.
Fighting with the IDF. Now, why should Israel defend these Druze across the border? And Sweden is not really across the border, a bit removed from the border. Number one, you have an interest in having this peaceful and friendly community on your border, rather than having all these Agonistes and Naim and Islamists and ISIS and an alphabet soup of jihadi organizations on your border. That's a clear national interest for Israel.
Right.
Yeah. Number two, Israel set the limits for Sharia. They said, okay, do not cross this line, and this should hold. This should be there. So I'm not saying that Israel or any other country should go fight for other people if other people are in distress. But when it's a combination of your own national interest in having, friendly group across from your border.
Right.
Even this even applies to South Lebanon. I mean, when Israel first went into Lebanon, they were looking for friends. They managed to get a friendly Christian militia that didn't survive for long. But the Israelis also tried to recruit friends from the Shia, including Nabi Berri himself, who's currently the Speaker of the Speaker of Parliament in Lebanon. So Israel does this. They try to recruit friendly tribes or people across the border because that's clearly makes sense for your national security. So I think in this case, Israel has an interest in not seeing the Druze being wiped out. Now, you add to it that domestically there was a strong Druze voice saying, "We came to you. As Israelis, we've been fighting shoulder to shoulder. Please help us rescue our brethren." There's an internal voice to this,
right?
But I don't think Israel or any other mature government would only act on emotions. And this is why, after warning Al-Shara, Israel didn't engage as much when this became a street-to-street fight. And so at this point, you have 2,500 Druze killed. And you think if Israel got involved, this wouldn't be a number that exists. So Israel didn't really get engaged as much. Maybe some support, guidance. There was they dropped aid, helicopters dropped aid on Suwaida, medicine, food, warning to Shara. I mean, but this is all of this. Israel is dancing around the issue. They're not really jumping.
You're saying it was more warning shots than it was.
Warning.
The most important one probably was the so-called defense ministry or military headquarters in Damascus. And I know that the White House was not happy that the Israelis did that. My interpretation here, if you guys disagree, is this was a very clear way of saying to Shara, you better use your troops to stop the violence, not increase the violence, or you have trouble with us. And you don't want to have trouble with us. And the reason they don't want to have trouble with us, if Shara, I want to talk more about him, is pragmatic, is because after the fall of Assad, the Israelis did go into Syria and wiped out the Syrian Navy, Air Force, arms depots. I mean, they essentially denuded. They said, you're not going to inherit anything that can threaten us from the Assad regime. So think about what you want to do after that.
That was a great step. I mean,
No, I was
assets right now.
Yeah.
He would have, been much more lethal in going after the Druze.
Yeah.
If I may, though, so when we talk about the Israeli Druze fighting in Gaza, but this is in line with the IDF's ethos. You're defending the state of Israel after an attack on the state of Israel, of which you're a citizen. You're a recruit in the army. You're not fighting for a tribal or sectarian cause. You're fighting for the cause of your nation. This is in line with in contradistinction to crossing the border, to fighting on behalf of the Druze in Syria. When we talk about these, that's the kind of the emotional element. When we talk about the interests of the state of Israel, however, and I think the comparison to Lebanon is apt, but in a bad way. First of all, as I noted, the feelings, the sentiments of the Druze in Sweden in general is not necessarily one of friendliness towards Israel. It's complex. And I think that complexity reminds me of Lebanon in a way where, the Israelis developed a relationship with what they thought were the Christians, right, writ large, TM, right, registered trademark. But really, they were developing a relationship with a subset of the Christians, the Maronites, and even a subset of them, the Gemayels, who Pierre Gemayel goes to Menachem Begin, tells him they're going to do to us what they did to you in Poland, right? Trying to play on that fear. I mean, Menachem Begin's entire worldview was formed by the Holocaust. Bashir Gemayel plays the Israeli angle and tells, but with Ariel Sharon, who's not a sentimentalist, who did not grow up in the shadow of the Holocaust, it's a Sabra. And for them, it's more of a political program, right? Come, help me become president, and we'll change the face of the Middle East. Meanwhile, Amin Ismail is playing the other angle, right? His brother is playing the other angle with the Syrians. This mission creep, right, to defend the Christians ends up with an Israeli invasion in Lebanon that relies on dubious allies, right? The Lebanese forces, the militia that Bashir Ismail put together. And this was a major complaint that the Israeli public had after the 1982 invasion of Lebanon was supposed to be 2 days, 40 kilometers up to the Litani River. It ends up the mission creep. Because of the secret deal between Ariel Sharon and Bashir Ismail, you reach Beirut to crown this man as president. Israeli forces are dying along the way. The Lebanese forces, this militia, are sitting back and watching. They do not intervene until much after Bashir Ismail's assassination with Sabra Shatila, and that's a separate issue. So they were an unreliable ally, right? And then when we talk about the SLA, so the South Lebanon Army, so this was a militia that was formed in 1978 by Saad Haddad, Major Saad Haddad, breakaway of the Lebanese army, again, under the same premise of we'll support a friendly actor across the border. But in time, the SLA became an albatross around Israel's neck where, in terms of their behavior, they were unprofessional. What they did in Khiam prison, for example, this ends up being attributed to the state of Israel because they're your proxy. Were atrocities, right? And they were incompetent. I remember an anecdote of Jezin, right? So this is an enclave of the Israeli security zone in South Lebanon that jutted into South Lebanon, and it was supposed to be manned by the SLA. And the Israelis gave them money and to recruit and to find weapons, and then the Israelis go in and check in a few months later, see where's this outpost, and they find a man and his son in a hookah, and they're like, "Where's the army?" And he's like, "This guy." And that's it. So the IDF, rather than outsourcing security, had to invest in protecting the SLA. Israeli forces died in South Lebanon over the course of the 15-year occupation of South Lebanon. And at a certain point, it became protecting the SLA rather than protecting Israel's interests until Ehud Barak, because of the way that the South Lebanon security zone was set up and because of the incompetence of this ally. So, and then when you talk about the sentiments, right? The Maronites are not unified to this day, even among the Lebanese forces, right now, Samir Jaja, who used to wear an Israeli-provided uniform, disavows any relationship with the Israelis, thumps his enmity towards Israel. But also you have much more committed anti-Israel ideologues like Sleiman Frangi, Maronite, and Gibran Basir, who plays the game. I don't think he has an ideology, but right now he's still anti-Israel. So I caution about looking at these groups as a unified body, and just because they're minorities, saying that they are friends to the state of Israel and invest in them, and you get returns on your benefit on your return. One last note. The Israelis could solve this problem by helping consolidation, right? The Syrian state consolidate. Now, with all the caveats that should be put on Shara, this man is a terrorist.
I want to talk about Al-Shara.
But at the same time, the Israelis, I think Yediot Achronot reported today that Dermer and the Syrian foreign minister,
Dermer, who is strategic minister of strategic affairs, right, very close to Benjamin Netanyahu,
will be meeting with the current Syrian foreign minister in Paris.
Yeah.
So right before this hubbub happened, right, there was a meeting between the Israelis and Shara's government or Representative Shara's government in Baku. So there was talk of security coordination and maybe not peace.
And there's no question this has set all that back. So I want to wrap this up because I want to move on to some other subjects. We're running low on time. If you were advising Benjamin Netanyahu, you would have said, don't go in. And if you're advising, you'd have said, yeah, go in.
No. I'd say don't go in.
But the way what he did, you kind of approve of what he actually did. When I say go in, I mean do things like, make it very clear to Shara that he's going to do more than issue statements, that he's going to, well, for example, hit the Ministry of Defense or the military in Damascus and say, understand, you do not want to make an enemy of us. And we care about what's happening on our border. As you say, we also care about what's happening to the Druze in their homeland, which I think the Israelis see that as a Druze homeland, southeast Suwaida and all that. Yeah, but that's where you guys disagree. Just so I understand.
I mean, I would say to the state of Israel, everything they did with Bashan Arrow 1 and 2, absolutely seizing the demilitarized zone, absolutely.
Yeah,
you secured the safety of your people. Now let the Syrians work out their internal dynamics, and don't make enemies of the Sunnis by making them, by feeding into this pre-existing.
Well, some of those Sunnis are already Israel's enemies. Sure. I think we know. Now, I do want to talk about Ahmed Al-Shara. Now, he was formerly, as we said, the head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham HTS, which is a terrorist organization. He was with Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which became ISIS. The question really is, has he changed? He's put on a nice suit and wears it well. He's trimmed his beard. I'll tell you this: when it seemed to me that Trump I would have advised Trump not to meet with him. I would have said, you know what, have your CIA chief meet with him instead. But Trump is Trump, and he wants to do things himself. I will also say that I was somewhat mollified to watch that meeting and see that there were Saudis in the room. And why do I say that mollifies me? Because my assessment is that the Saudis are quite pragmatic at this point, and that they may be saying to Al-Shara, look, don't depend too much on Turkey and on Erdogan. For one thing, he's a Turk, not an Arab. You're an Arab. You know the difference. For another thing, he's a neo-Ottoman. Think what that means to us Arabs if you're bowing and kissing the ring of a neo-Ottoman. Also, he's not as rich as we are. You want investments in this country? What do you want next? Because we can give you a lot of investments, and when we have new reports of like huge amounts. I've got it written down here. We can give you huge investments in your country. He'll set up military installations manned by Turks in your country. Which do you want? And so that kind of, well, maybe this is going well. Again, it's very tricky who this guy is and what he believes at this point. He doesn't have to be a liberal or a Jeffersonian. Is he a pragmatist? And I think the main thing is this, and this is the last thing I'll say on this and let you guys go, is look, people are talking, including Americans, about centralization of power and all that. We shouldn't be nation building. We can't do it. We shouldn't try. but we should be concerned with basic human rights and tolerance. Tolerance is a Western concept. Tolerance doesn't mean, you have big parades for the Druze in downtown Damascus every and a Druze month and all. You don't have to have all that. What you have to say is we tolerate their existence. We're not going to kill them because we think they are not good Muslims. That's what tolerance means to me. We abide their existence. Up to you. You want to trade with them. You want to have dinner with them. You don't have to. Just that much. But if you can't do that, if you're going to kill them because this is a Muslim part of the world and they're not Muslims or they're heretics or they're apostates or they're unbelievers, then we can't give you any support. That's how I think human rights is an American value that we cannot leave aside entirely. Go ahead.
So number one, Shara proclaimed himself as the president of Syria just because he had more machine guns than the other guys.
Right.
There's no reason why he should be the president and not Mazloum Abdi, the leader of the Kurds in the northeast.
Oh, and I do want to talk about the Kurds because
yes.
and just so we understand, the Kurds are in the northeast. They, like the Druze, have a land area, and basically what the Druze want, what the Kurds want, we could talk about others, is basic autonomy. They're not necessarily, the Kurds, look, I've never met a Kurd who didn't want his own country, but I've also known plenty of Iraqi Kurds who say, look, if we can be treated equally and with tolerance, we'll stay within the Iraqi coalition. The problem is that hasn't quite happened. Anyhow, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
So the point here is that Shara proclaimed himself president.
Right.
And there's
and we've recognized him essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's and the equivalent of the onion in the Arabic-speaking world is called al-hudud, and they came up with an amazing headline following the day when Shara proclaimed himself and renewed the constitution and everything, and the headline was that Ahmed Shara proclaims himself as Hafiz al-Assad. So he literally he at this point he has more powers than Assad. So and the basic idea is that he had to change for Syria to be all inclusive, including the official name of Syria. Syria's name is the Syrian Arab Republic under Assad. And when they met, they said, the Kurds and everybody else said, can you please drop the Arab, just make it the Syrian Republic so that we're not Arab, we're Kurds. We'll be part of, and the Syrians and the Turkmens and the other guys.
Right.
And they refused to do that, number one. Number two, there are two articles in the Syrian constitution, holdover from the previous constitution. Number one, that specifies that the president of Syria must be Muslim. This leaves everybody else out. Alawites, Druze, Christians, you name it, which is 35% of the population. The second article says that Islam is a major source of legislation, and he kept that in. So only these three issues they leave 35% of the population out of the new Syria. So number one, he's not setting up a Syria for everyone from the get-go. Number two, what he's asking the Kurds, forget the Druze. The Druze are weak and minor, and the Kurds are 2 million Kurds, much more powerful. They got war-hardened by fighting against ISIS with U.S. supervision. They did a great job eliminating ISIS. And now they're sitting in their pocket.
And are detested by Erdogan, we should point out.
Detested by Erdogan. Erdogan's main instruction to Shara and to his guys in Syria is take on these guys, which they tried to do.
Take on the Kurds.
Take on the Abu Amshi went after the Kurds. The Kurds beat him. So they couldn't do it. But the point here is that what Shara is offering, other than proclaiming himself as president, everything, and having no authority, there's no check on Shara's power whatsoever in Syria right now. Not from his people, not from the Kurds, not from everyone, from anyone. So what he's saying is that you Kurds, hand me your guns. And the Kurds said, look, we are willing to enter the state, but jointly as peers. You give us battalions in the army, officers, Minister of Defense or something in the Foreign Ministry. At this point, everyone who's a decision maker in Syria is from HTS. Everyone, and he has a dozen of decor ministers, tokens from Christian or Druze, who are they call Minister of Telecom or Minister of whatnot, and these have no authority.
Right.
So what the Druze and the Kurds are saying, look, if you want us to be part of Syria, you have to make space for us. If you don't want us to be part of Syria, fine, but just let us do our thing. Like, police are cities and just
again, some more autonomy and some federalism, decentralization. And I don't think that should be such a hard thing for us to understand. We live in the United States.
Yes,
they're not United Provinces, the United States. It was a long path to the point where Washington controls these various states. There was significant autonomy to the various states in the U.S. And there's less so, but there's still arguments being made. They call it states' rights, but I think it's better to call it state powers, right?
Right, but the thing is, he's not giving them the option.
Yeah, he's not giving them. Well, that's the problem. Yeah,
and what he's doing now is exactly what Assad used to do. He's scaring everyone into thinking that I'm your only option, and that's what our envoy Tom Barrack said. He said, "Well, we have no alternative." Everyone said, "Oh, look, if Shara is out, Iran will come back, or someone will come back." And this is the bad. What you see now is that Iran is getting out and being replaced by Islamist Turkey and Islamist Qatar. What should happen, this is my recommendation to the U.S. government, is that we should get our allies in line and keep the three troublemakers out, Iran, Turkey, and Qatar. Keep these three governments out of Syria, get everybody else in line and say, these people will support you, Shara. And this is how your government, if your government looks like this, you'll get all the money, also the support, all the recognition. But there has to be a master planner. Israel can't do this.
No.
And Israel is not.
No, Israel can't do it.
Yeah. So.
And by the way, just as the Israelis do have a certain attachment, it's fair to say, to the Druze of Syria, so the U.S. have a certain attachment to the Kurds of Syria. Why? Because the Kurds and the Americans fought together. And we had Seb Gorka here at FDD earlier this week, who's at the White House, and he mentioned this, that we've shed blood along with the Kurds. Now the Turks say, yeah, but they're essentially terrorists, and they're the fact of the matter is, and I've talked to special forces guys who have been in you could rely on the Kurds. We couldn't have done what we did without the Kurds. By the way, the Russians attacked the Americans in Syria, and this was under Trump, and the Russians, where they were a Wagner group, essentially, were wiped out.
By the United States.
Huh? By the United States, by the Americans. Yeah. Everybody was very quiet about that, including Putin, because it was humility. I think it was 2019. They came in to wipe that. The Americans, again, a small number of Americans. I don't think it ever got more than about 3,000, if I remember.
Two max.
Two max. They were force multipliers for what the Syrian Democratic Forces. Isn't that what they were called? It includes Arabs, but it was mainly Kurds, and so we do have a certain attachment. I think. Look, I think when you owe somebody something, you pay up. I think we have been bad to the Kurds too often. If people rely on you, and you're a great power, they should be able to rely on you.
My understanding is now we're twisting their arm, saying you either bend the knee to Shara, or we're leaving. And you're being weaker. And if this happens, I think SDF will go to Iran, which is right next to them in Iran.
What are they going to do? And that's a mistake.
Yeah.
But that'll be our mistake.
Exactly.
We have forced that to happen. I don't want to see that happen. All right, we're getting close to an hour here, so I should do. But there are other things on my list. There may be other things on your list. Russia would like to get back in. I mean, part of what Putin has sacrificed is he had gotten himself in Syria, and that had became a major power in the Middle East again, as the Soviets were, and that was important to him. And now he's out of it. I don't know that he can get back in so long as he's fighting in Syria, and I don't know that Bashar wants him to. I don't know. What else do you want to? Do you want to make sure you at other points that you want to get in? And I won't go through all my little notes here.
So I'll talk, I guess, about dealing with Shara and whether Shara has changed. I'm skeptical, obviously. The man ideology is not shed easily, and this man did not start in a benign organization. As you noted, he started his career in Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
An ideology that's theology is even harder.
Sure, of course. Yeah. And this is the same reason why we can't come to a modus vivendi with the Islamic Republic of Iran, because you can beat them, you can deter them, you can pound them down, but the ideology will always be the drive to pursue a specific end goal by hook or by crook. At the same time, I think if there's been a lesson of the Arab Spring, and Shara strikes me as, again, a gray man at this point, but a smart man regardless. And if he's learned the lessons of the past 10 to 15 years, it's that even autocrats cannot go so far out of lockstep with their people and expect to remain in power, right? We saw what happened to Gaddafi. He himself deposed Assad because Assad lost legitimacy by slaughtering his people in ways that Shara couldn't even begin to approximate. And what the Syrian people want at this point, and I'm talking about the vast majority of the Syrian people who are Sunni Arab, who are, despite being Sunni, not necessarily anywhere near being jihadists. We're talking about the urban Sunni class that formed this idea of Syria. They want peace and quiet. They don't want wars. They don't want trouble.
They've had wars for a long time. That makes you tired.
Yes, they have. A friend of mine who's visiting Damascus for the first time in a decade plus since the Syrian civil war showed me images of Damascus itself, where it looks worse than Gaza,
and Aleppo is even worse than Damascus.
Well,
which was once a great city. Yeah.
Yes. But this is the heart of Assad's control for so long. Yeah. And this is something that the Assad regime tried to hide from the outside world. You have bare hours of electricity, no access to water. If Shara decides to pursue his ideological predilections, either now or in the near future, that segment of the Syrian people is going to rebel against him. He needs to, again, if he wants to maintain power, and I think that's his goal, he needs to go in line with them. Now, does that mean he won't try to push and won't try to mess around down the line once he consolidates power? I don't know, but I think our hope in Syria is the Syrian people, right? Using them as to anchor Shara and his worst instincts. And then we can use, obviously, the Saudis. We can use regional allies to keep him in line with other inducements like, hey, if you want to keep the Syrian people happy, well, you need money. That's where Saudi Arabia comes in. So I think the question of his ideological orientation becomes less relevant if you can constrain the man and not take your eye off the ball. Now, I think it was a mistake that President Trump met with him. I think there should have been a trust but verify with emphasis on the verification. I think the Israeli approach initially, which was let's secure our interests, let's make sure you can't harm us, and then we can talk and see if you've had your own vision on the road to Damascus or not. But ultimately, let's see where this plays out. Now, when it comes to fractiousness in Syria, I think this, we're caught in between a rock and a hard place. Either as the United States, or if we're looking at it from the Israeli perspective. The man that deposed Assad, who was the focal point of Iranian control over Syria and Iranian projection power into Lebanon against Israel through Syria, is an Islamist terrorist. Right? This is his pedigree. There's no way he can shed that. We don't have an ideal person in the seat of power in Damascus. At the same time, so that's the one dilemma. The other dilemma is that fractiousness is exactly how Iran enters countries. Right? If we look at Lebanon, if Lebanon had a strong, cohesive national identity, a strong, cohesive central state, a strong, cohesive public, Iran could never have come and said, "Oh, Shiites, come onto my end. I can serve you because the Sunnis are not your friends, because the Maronites are not your friends, because the Lebanese state will not uphold your interests." And if we start to promote fractiousness, and this is exactly what allowed Iran to enter Syria, mind you, Assad's Faustian bargain with the Iranians, Assad's overreaction to demands for reform in Syria led to a fracturing of the strong central state. Iran enters. Right? So now, by promoting separatism, which has no basis, by the way, in international law for either the Druze or the Kurds, what we're promoting also is incidentally shooting ourselves in the foot as the United States by preventing consolidation. By preventing consolidation, look, the SDF, as Hussain noted, and I think, or maybe you noted, right? They're not ideologically linked to us. Yes, maybe there's a covenant of blood, having shed blood together, but they will, and they have switched sides throughout the Syrian civil war, and they will switch sides again to the Iranians if they feel that their interests are better served through Iran. And we can't allow that to remain as like an albatross over our head, blackmail, like, oh, either you invest in us and you do what we want, or we go to the Iranians. But this shows us that Iran still has room to maneuver in Syria. And the more we create fractiousness, the more we promote fractiousness, we actually risk, be it through the Kurds, through the Druze, through the Alawites particularly, who I don't think have reconciled themselves by any means to their loss of power over Syria.
The Alawites have also been under attack by the Sunni.
I think, again, another complex situation.
And I think initially we thought, okay, well, that's revenge, but I'm not entirely sure. Here's the only thing that that bothers me about what you're saying, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, and then I'll let you have the last word. And that is, I don't want to be all in on consolidation if that means what we think is that the dictator in Damascus has power over everybody. I'd rather that we be for a more federalist system, more autonomy, so that local groups have some sense of self-determination and some rights in terms of culture, language, religion, because those are American values. And so what we should be, not just, I don't want to push just for consolidation and a unitary state, meaning we support dictatorship. That bothers me.
So I'm not saying support dictatorship. I'm saying be realistic. And when we speak of
and be realistic is a more federalist system where you don't, the Kurds have some autonomy. The Druze have some autonomy. The Christians have some rights. The Alawites have some rights.
Question, you said a word, self-determination, and I think this is a tricky one because this is a concept that is an outgrowth of international law, and self-determination accrues to peoples, right? The Druze, the Christians do not qualify as peoples, right? In the definition of international law, they don't have the indicia of peoplehood that, say, the Belgians or the Jews have.
Because they're not a nation state?
Because they're not because they are not.
The Kurds are a people.
The Kurds, but so there's.
Okay,
I didn't say the Kurds. Let me get to the Kurds.
And I think the Druze are people too. But all right.
But they're not, and that's the thing. They are an outgrowth of. They're ethnically Arab. Their language is Arab. The only
they are a distinct ethno-religious group. Yes, they come from. They're Semites. Maybe they're from Arabs, but I don't think you can say they are simply Arabs anymore because they may say, look, and I'm going to go to you on this because their DNA has been specific for a long time since they don't intermarry with other Arabs.
So do other minorities, and we don't. Religion alone is not an indicia of peoplehood. Again, the concept of applying peoplehood to a specific group is very complex. And to say my religion makes me an endogamous group, and therefore, right, I am a separate people entitled to self-determination.
Well, not self-determination in the sense of a nation state, but self-determination in terms of some rights and some autonomy.
So autonomy. So this is where we get into what does self-determination look like, and the popular misconception of self-determination is that it's binary. Either you have independence or something less. So self-determination is a spectrum, and it means if you are a people, if you are entitled to self-determination, there's two competing concepts here. First of all, international law, for the purpose of stability, likes to preserve the existing borders of states. And there's a concept called uti possidetis or iuris. So a colonial entity goes by the wayside. You possess as you possess. You possess the same.
That's why Israel's not occupying territory.
Exactly, but actually, exactly.
Yeah.
And so and the reason for that is because every day a group can emerge and demand separatism of some degree, and to give into that would create instability on such a massive scale. It would contravene the very purpose of international law and the international order. So when it comes to the Kurds, Syria arose within these borders. Are they imperfect? Perhaps. But when we talked about self-determination at the time that Syria arose, there was a group that was a majority, and self-determination really accrues to the majority over everyone else in a specific area. It accrued to these Sunni Arabs within these specific borders. The Kurds happen to be a minority. Now, are they entitled to, because they are specifically with the Kurds, they are a separate ethnic group, they do have a separate history, they have a separate language, they have indicia of peoplehood beyond just religious markers. I take you to the Quebec case, which is the seminal case in international law, which says that if you are able to fulfill your rights through the existing state, you have no right of secession. Even a right of autonomy is not guaranteed. What you do have as a right, as an ethnic minority or as a religious minority, is a right to equality within states. And once that is not fulfilled to some degree, and this is not an automatic process that, over the course of 2 months, your rights are not fulfilled, you have the right to start talking about secession or autonomy. Right? This is a very difficult process, again, because of international law's interest in preserving existing states. Then we can talk about what arrangement you have vis-a-vis the central government that might grant you autonomy. But that would accrue to the Kurds, maybe the Turkmens, but it does not accrue to the Druze because they are ultimately a religious group. They are ethnically Arab. They are linguistically Arab. Their history is from the Arab world. Regardless of tradition, we're talking about ethnography here, right? What scholars say about the history of the Druze, they are an Arab people.
Right.
By that logic, we could say Shiites also constitute some kind of separate entity because they have a particular religion, and it makes them differ from the Sunni majority, and so they have a right to separatism. It doesn't work that way.
I'm going to give you the last word or words, and to finish up here.
Well, yeah, I mean, to go back to politics and policy, I think there are two ways to handle Syria: either crisis management or a clear plan of how to transform Syria into a better country. What we have, with this diplomacy currently, is crisis management, and we're reacting, and it becomes a game of whack them all. And what you saw happen in Sweden, I think, will repeat, and you'll see a bigger fight with the Kurds, and so we're not getting it. And even if they're done with the Druze and the Kurds, you'll see Sharia going after Abu Amshi to disarm him, and Abu Amshi would not disarm the Turkey guy.
Right.
So this is crisis management. If you want something more durable, I think, like I said, we need to have a roadmap. And currently, there's no one but the United States to lead this. Russia's in Ukraine and busy, and the Chinese are not really up to speed. And I mean, like we used to have the quartets in the past. Now you don't have one. You only have
not that the quartet ever did very much. The problem is that if you're pushing this with the U.S. government, I agree. Only you. There's nobody else who can possibly do it. This administration doesn't want a nation build. But I think what you're suggesting is they don't have to, but there still have to be some demands if Sharia wants to have good relations with the U.S. and with the Saudis,
or replicate what we have in Lebanon right now. So what we told the Lebanese is that, okay, listen, you stand here, Hezbollah is almost crushed, but you have to disarm. If you disarm, you'll get the money, and this is the roadmap that you have to salvation. If you don't take it, you'll stay isolated, and Israel will keep on policing you. Right. So I think we have to have something similar with the Syrians. So look, if you want to go into civil war, that's your thing. But if you want our help and assistance, this is the roadmap. Do A, B, C, and with each step you will get support and you will get our assistance. And this has to be all of us. So we can't be, for example, Financial Services Committee in the House. They decided not to waive Caesar, not to kill it, and now they're amending it, attaching conditions, which I think is the right step.
That's conditions. So you meet these conditions, you'll get what you want.
Exactly. Right. But our allies, the Saudis, just announced investing $6 billion in Syria. It can't work like this. If each one of us is going in their direction, and the Israelis are focused on security, and the Saudis are investing, and we have something else, I think America should step up, bring everyone behind us in line, and tell Sharia or whoever wants to become president, this is what you do, and if you do it,
good place for the U.S. and the Saudis to partner to make sure that Syria is not a threat to any of its neighbors, would you say?
I think the Saudis will support us if we have a plan. But as long as we don't have a plan, I think the Saudis will just keep on improvising like they're doing right now.
All right. Fascinating conversation. It is complicated. I don't know that we've simplified things for those listening in, but they've learned something. Thank you, Hussain. Thank you, David. Thanks to all of you who have been with us for this conversation here today on Foreign Podicy.